We have breaking news. President Trump has said he has a, quote, framework of a deal in place regarding Greenland. He posted on Truth Social saying, quote, based upon a very productive meeting that I have had with the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, we have formed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region. This solution, if consummated, will be a great one for the United States of America and all NATO nations. Based upon this understanding, I will not be imposing the tariffs that were scheduled to go into effect on February 1st. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cortez is in our Washington bureau. Obviously, an interesting development here. And as our teams work to find out more of what this framework entails, does this tell you that this is perhaps a win for President Trump's strategy, which is talk this big game, ask for the whole shebang to get something that he wants out of it?
Maybe, but I think it depends on what it turns out that he has gotten out of it, because he could have gotten a lot just by talking to Denmark and Greenland leaders. They were kind of willing to give him carte blanche to build up the U.S. military in Greenland, to have more access to Greenland. So I think the real question is, what exactly is this deal? One thing that his Truth Social post does not make any mention of is the U.S. owning or buying Greenland, which would indicate that that is not actually part of the deal that he is laying out here. So we'll have to see what the U.S. officials who are in Davos say, what the Secretary of General of NATO, who was in that meeting, has to say. But I do think it's really notable that the president says here, based on this understanding, I will not be imposing the tariffs that were scheduled to go into effect on February 1st. That's important because one of the reasons that European leaders speaking at Davos have been so angry is because when they came to Denmark's support in this conflict and said, hey, the U.S. doesn't have any right to Greenland, it has been a territory of Denmark since the 1800s, the president turned around this weekend and said, oh, if you feel that way, then I will slap 10% tariffs on half a dozen European countries in February, and then another 25% tariff in the summer. And that really enraged European leaders who had spent the better part of a year negotiating, at the president's request, a new trade deal to bring tariffs down. And so, yes, they will be relieved that those tariffs aren't going into place, but they will also likely argue that this diplomacy by threat is not a great way to carry on and to strengthen the U.S.-European relationship.
And all three major indexes started seeing gains when the president did put this out on Truth Social. A lot of investors were getting spooked at the idea of more tariffs. I want to ask you what your take is on the relationship between Rutte and Trump. Does he kind of seem like the Trump whisperer to you? Because the president came out swinging in Davos, European leaders came out swinging back in some of their remarks. But whenever we do hear Rutte and Trump together, it seems like Rutte speaks his language.
Right. He's sort of good cop. He's the one who, has a lot of praise for President Trump, a lot of gratitude with President Trump anytime that they are together. And he's in a little bit of a different position than other European leaders because he is the Secretary General of NATO and not the leader of a European country. He's not as worried about his constituency or his voters in that country. And so sometimes, while it behooves specific European leaders to come out swinging at the President Trump or more broadly at the U.S., I'm thinking of just in the past couple of days, Emmanuel Macron saying that the U.S. is a bully, or Prime Minister Carney of Canada saying the old world order is over, some really strenuous language for NATO allies. The Secretary General can kind of be the good cop and can kind of go in there and smooth things over with President Trump. He's called him daddy before, and basically, indicated that really NATO really hinges on President Trump and his generosity and what he decides to do. And, that's partly strategic because NATO really does need the United States to continue to sell U.S. weaponry to the Europeans in order to protect and assist Ukraine. So that relationship between NATO's Secretary General and President Trump is really vital.
And I have to be quick with you on this, but it seems like Steve Witkoff and Marco Rubio will be adding even more to their hats because as part of this Truth Social post, the president said that Vice President Vance, Secretary of State Rubio, Special Envoy Witkoff, and others will be responsible for the negotiations on top of this board of peace as it pertains to Gaza, on top of Ukraine and Russia negotiations.
And on top of Venezuela, don't forget about Venezuela too, a major agenda item, particularly on Secretary Rubio's to-do list. So yes, they've already got a lot going on, and there are still a lot of questions, Lindsay, about how exactly this board of peace in Gaza is going to operate, how much power President Trump would have, and that's the reason that a lot of European countries are still kind of holding back and haven't announced that they're joining up yet.
Nancy Cortez, don't stray too far away from that camera in case something else happens. Thank you.
You're welcome.